This conference will now be recorded.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Mark Peepel. I'm Vice President of FBA, and my family business is Peepel & Associates Supertemp. We're in the recruiting and staffing business in Halifax, and we've been in business for 30 years. We've been a long-time member of FBA and supported it throughout the course of our time, and even before it was another name, which I can't think of at the moment. But anyway, we are now about to start another of our Stay Connected webinar series, and today we're welcoming Dr. Alicia Pence and Joel Muse. Dr. Pence is Senior Instructor of the Department of Psychology and Neuroscience and Psychiatry at Dalhousie University and a registered psychologist in the province of Nova Scotia. She's also an affiliated scientist with IWK Health Centre and the Nova Scotia Health Authority, and is a co-founder and senior scientific director for the internet-based CBT company out of Nova Scotia, Tranquility Online. She previously worked in the outpatient mental health services IWK Hospital Center for 10 years, providing CBT for anxiety, mood disorders, and served as the team leader for Anxiety Clinic for several years. And our other presenter will be Joel Muse, who in fact is a trained chartered financial analyst after graduating with a degree of finance from St. Mary's University here in Halifax. He's worked 6 years as a stock analyst for the local investment company, but always really interested in the startup community. And Joel's first diagnosis with generalized anxiety and depression happened in the last year of high school, and has been a mental health advocate ever since, which is when he decided to create Tranquility Online. So our presenters are very keyed up on looking at mental health. We're all suffering from overview of too many Zoom meetings or webinars or everything else like that. And we have some light in the end of the tunnel that we will see some openings and hopefully some normality back to reality. FBA has been a vital part of this process to keep us all engaged and to help us, get ready to restart and move our business along. In some cases, changing what we've done to help us, basically stay in business, and that's what we're all trying to do. Our presenters are obviously going to touch on making that mental health a priority and making sure that we're all focused. We're getting together. We've obviously had a lot of time together in various people's families, so we may not like our families at this point either. So that may be another issue as well too. Or about to meet our families for the first time in a number of weeks. I let our presenters help us with our mental health. Leave it to our presenters to start the seminar. Thank you.
Sure. Thanks so much for the introduction. Yep. Thanks so much for the introduction. I'll just start off by introducing just a little bit of my story, and then I'll pass it off to Dr. Pencer, who is the expert on this. But just as a little bit of background, the reason why I myself was very passionate about kind of leaving my career as a stock analyst and then creating Tranquility Online is because I had my own struggles with anxiety and depression, and as a stock analyst I eventually burnt out, and I tried to get help through the public system, and it was extremely difficult to do so. So after actually finding an online cognitive behavioral therapy platform from the US, I went through that process, and it helped me a great deal. And I thought to myself, this was a really good experience. And then I wrote a blog about kind of what I was going through, and it was about my struggles and then also about the struggles to get help. And it kind of went viral and blew up. I had like, 4,000 people read it within 48 hours and all these people commenting on it. And that's kind of the first thing that kind of hinted to me that maybe instead of just talking about it or complaining about it, I should be part of the solution. So I decided to see if I could create something that could help a lot of people. And I knew that to do that, I needed to find a scientific expert in doing this. And that's when I met Dr. Pencer. So I'll pass it out to Alyssa to introduce herself and then talk about some tips that we can all follow to make sure that we stay healthy.
Thanks, Joel. Hi, everybody. It's good to see some faces. As somebody said, right, we've been Zooming and meeting this way for a while, so I'm getting used to it. It's good to see some cameras on. So yeah, I am a psychologist, and I work at, my main job is actually with Dalhousie University, teaching in the clinical psychology program there. But I'm also, as you heard, the co-founder and senior scientific director with Tranquility. So I worked at the IWK for about 10 years first, and kind of on the flip side of Joel, who kind of struggled finding care in the system, I, as a person working in the system, found it really frustrating to not be able to provide care in a timely fashion to people. So kind of became frustrated with the system from the other end, and kind of coming together to form Tranquility to try to provide care to as many people as possible was a goal that we had together. So that's how that happened. So just a couple things. I'm gonna just be kind of talking about stress and anxiety and managing it during and after this pandemic, or whatever after is. And so certainly, if you're comfortable and you want to ask a question, please do so. You don't have to kind of wait till the end. I'm happy to kind of have a discussion throughout if that's what you'd like. I also have the chat open. I don't know if you all kind of know the chat, but I've got it open, and you can either type a message there that everyone can see, or if you open the chat, you'll see that down the bottom it says to, and right now mine says everyone, but you can actually click on that and just put my name, which I guess is presenter. And so I think, unless you can see my name, maybe you can see my name. I can't see my name, but maybe you can. Then if you prefer to kind of ask a bit more anonymously, obviously I'll know who you are asking, but nobody else would. I would just kind of say, oh, there's a question, and just ask it without giving your name if that's more comfortable. So, I mean, we all know that this has been a very difficult and trying time for everyone. I feel like we've said it over and over that we're all in this together, but I do believe that that's true, right? We all have our own journeys, but we're all in the same, what did I hear the other day? We're not in the same boat, but we're in the same storm. So I liked that, right? We've all got our own boat, but we're all in the same storm. So we're all going to feel stress and anxiety at different points, triggered by different things. Some people were already working from home, and that wasn't as big a deal for them, but certainly I'm sure those people had to go to the grocery store and go places that, so for them it might be that kind of thing. For others, it's the working from home, right? If you're not used to working from home, maybe you're not being as productive as you'd like to be, and we'll talk about that. That's normal, right? We're in a pandemic. I think sometimes we forget, not forget we're in it, but we expect that we're able to do what we're able to do in normal times, and that's just not the way it is for most people. That might be other responsibilities you have. The one I've heard the most is childcare, right? People at home, like myself. I should have said, if you hear thumping coming from my mic, my daughter is upstairs with her father having a dance practice. They decided to do a Zoom practice at the exact same time as this. So I certainly understand that piece. So for some people, again, having their children at home and trying to do the homeschooling has been easier or harder, right? Everybody's been a bit different. It might be that you have elderly parents that you're caring for or you're really worried about, or it might be you're on your own, and that's just as stressful for different reasons, right? So I think part of what I wanted to talk about today is there's kind of two pieces to this. One is that we all might be experiencing some kind of stress or anxiety. It might be new to us, right? So for some of us, this kind of feeling of stress and anxiety to the level that we're feeling might be new. For others, it maybe is a familiar feeling that's maybe worsened during this time or was triggered during this time. And for others, it's really kind of tipped over the edge from that kind of normal, we'll call it normal stress and anxiety that we can expect many of us to be feeling. For some people, that's tipped into what we'd say is an anxiety disorder or depression or some other mental health concern. And when I say it's tipped over, it means, it's worsened, it's more distressing, it's getting in the way. So, whereas some of us might be a little nervous about, for example, if we have to go to the grocery store, this person may be, so anxious they're unable to even leave their house, even when we're told we're allowed to, right? Even as things loosen up, things like that. That's just an example. Or somebody who, their depression has gotten to the point where it's not just that they feel kind of not a lot of energy and not a lot of motivation. They are actually quite sad or quite kind of feeling empty, and have even stopped kind of trying to reach out to their friends and things like that. So I'll talk about tips for those kind of general stress and anxiety that we might all be feeling. And then we'll talk just a little bit about some resources for anyone who has or knows anybody who might kind of be in the more significant range of that stress and anxiety and depression. So in terms of tips for managing the kind of general stress and anxiety, I think one thing I've heard a lot from people is that because they're working from home, and even people that have always worked from home, it's still different. And so it's kind of, people are finding it hard to kind of separate their work from the rest of their lives, right? Especially everybody's, again, in a different situation. How big's your house? How much room do you have? Do you have a backyard, right? All of those different pieces that, again, now that we're opening up, that's fantastic. So at least people that maybe are stuck in little apartments can get out and do more. But it still kind of bleeds into, right, the timing, right? Maybe you don't have to stop at a certain time. Maybe it's, maybe there's a certain room that, that's where you're doing your work, and that's also where you watch your TV later, right? So you're not even kind of getting out and doing different things. So one thing that can be really helpful to kind of keep in mind is it's almost like it's a bit of a formula for wellness, and that is having some form of enjoyment in your life, some form of what we call kind of achievement or accomplishment, right? So that you've got something that you feel like, okay, I did something today, and some form of social connection. So if you've got enjoyment, achievement or accomplishment, and social connection, that is going to help in staying well. And for some people, that's easier said than done, right? So if you've got a lot of responsibilities and you're working really hard, you may feel that achievement, but you may not. So we're gonna talk in a minute also about how to be compassionate towards yourself during these times and outside these times too. Part of that is recognizing that this isn't about increasing your productivity or this need to be productive. I'm sure we've all seen, some of the movie stars and people talking about, oh, this is a great time to, learn how to cook or learn a new language and do all these fantastic things, right? And it's kind of like, well, yeah, if you've got nothing else to do, which is not true for most of us. I mean, if you have been able to do that, that's fantastic. But it's that pressure to do that, right? So when I talk about increasing some of these things in your life in terms of achievement and pleasure and social contact, I don't mean adding on top, kind of putting pressure, because that defeats the purpose, right? This is about maybe reorganizing your time a little bit, or finding something simple, right? So when I said, for example, accomplishment, that might be, if you are working, that might be acknowledging, like, wow, I obviously didn't get as much done as I would have if I had been, in a regular work day, but I did 3 meetings today, or I, got through two items off my checklist today. And so part of that might not be adding anything at all. It might actually be just taking a moment to acknowledge yourself and acknowledge that you were able to accomplish something that day. It might be you managed to do your laundry that day, right? Whatever it is that you were able to do. Again, it doesn't have to be extra things. It might be that you need to find how to do something a bit differently. This can be both accomplishment and enjoyment. So maybe you used to go to the gym, for example. So it's finding something to replace that, although I hear the gyms are opening up. So we'll see what that looks like. But right, so maybe it's go for a walk around your neighborhood. Maybe it's find something online to do. And again, it doesn't have to be, maybe you used to go to the gym for an hour, but if you can do 15 minutes of something, really kind of acknowledge that that's the best you can do right now. And that's something that is important to you. So same with enjoyment, right? Like, what is it? If the things you used to enjoy were, a lot of them are out and about, right? What can you do that we can still do from a social distance, right? But I don't know if everybody heard before, we're talking about kind of going to a park and you're able to stay your distance and still, be with friends and things like that, be with colleagues. So certainly, particularly now that things are opening up a bit, finding the time to do those things. And when I say finding the time, that's a biggie for some people, right? Like, what does that mean? It means that it'd be really good to kind of even think about, what are these things? So what are some things I want to do that's enjoyment? What are some social connection things I want to do? And once you decide what it is you want to do, and they don't all have to be every day. Again, this isn't about pressure and adding a bunch of things, but this is throughout your week. What are some of these things you're going to do? And schedule them in just like you would a meeting, right? So if you say, okay, I really want to go for a 15-minute walk every day or a 45-minute walk every day, find a time that's going to work for you, schedule it in, don't move it, right? If you have to kind of cancel it, don't cancel it, move it just like you would a meeting, right? If you have a meeting and somebody says, oh, I really can't do that time, you don't say, okay, we'll find another time sometime, right? You actually rebook the meeting, right? So that's a really important piece of how to make sure these things still get done, even if you're feeling overwhelmed, is to schedule them in. So schedule some time for enjoyment, schedule some time for social connection. If there is something you want to accomplish, you could schedule that in. If you're already accomplishing a lot, just, as I said, spending that time to acknowledge. So that's that piece. I've got more tips, and if there are any comments or questions at this point, I can take them.
Question, Alyssa.
Yeah.
Just wondering, do you recommend like a daily time frame for that or a weekly time frame? What are you suggesting?
Yeah, I think, again, it depends on the person and your time. If the thing you enjoy can only take 10 or 15 minutes or half an hour, I might suggest every day. If it's something bigger, then it might be weekly. I do suggest finding something daily, even if it's just listening to music or reading a book or going for a quick walk. Certainly, I do try to recommend something small daily, and then if it's a bigger thing, weekly. And same with social connection, right? If it can just be a quick text or message daily, and then if it's more that you want to have a bigger thing, to do it weekly. Nothing there. Okay. So I mentioned self-compassion. That's another piece that we can quickly talk about, because there's a whole thing on self-compassion. There's whole books on self-compassion. So I'm not going to go into it in too big detail, other than to say, remember to acknowledge that we are in a pandemic, and acknowledge that what you're feeling is okay, whatever that is. If some people are actually feeling guilty because they're feeling okay, right? Like they're not stressed and they're not finding it difficult, and so then they feel guilty about that. So everybody's kind of got their different feelings, and whatever it is, know it's normal. There's people out there like you, no matter whether it's that you're feeling overly stressed and overwhelmed, or whether you're feeling guilty because you're not feeling stressed and overwhelmed, or whatever it is. So acknowledging that we're all humans and we all have these emotions, and we are in a pandemic that none of us have ever been through before. And so just the first part of self-compassion is just acknowledging that piece. The next piece, that's kind of a quick tip. As I said, there's lots of stuff you can do for self-compassion, but the quick tip is to think about what you would say to a friend if they came to you with the same kind of thoughts and feelings that you're having. So, for example, if a friend calls you up and says, oh, look, I'm really finding myself overwhelmed. I've got this childcare, and I've got to work, and I've got these projects that are due, and I just don't think I can get it done. I'm so lazy, or I don't know what's wrong with me. If a friend said that to you, I hope your response would not be, yeah, you're right. You're lazy. I don't know what's wrong with you. Right? That's not what you're going to say, hopefully. Right? So, really, what would you say to that friend? You'd probably say, yeah, it really sucks. It's really tough for you. If there's anything I can do to help, what is it that, you could do, or whatever. So self-compassion is about flipping that around to yourself, right? What would you say to a friend? Say it to yourself. What would you recommend to a friend? Recommend it to yourself. That's one small piece, but I do find that can be really helpful, because we're much kinder and compassionate to our friends and family than we are to ourselves sometimes. So catching that kind of self-talk can be really important. So there is another question, but I'll get to it in a minute. Another piece that can go along with self-compassion and these other pieces are mindfulness. When I say mindfulness, I don't necessarily mean mindful meditation, right? An hour long, sitting there practicing mindful meditation. If you can do that and that works for you, absolutely. But I'm talking about just a brief, few minute. When I talk about mindfulness, for me, it's more about bringing yourself back to the present, paying attention to what's happening right here, right now, right? There's a book out there written by another psychologist in the States that I love the title. It's Get Out of Your Mind and Into Your Life, right? It's for that, it's more about, it can be anything. Maybe you're having a meal and your mind is kind of thinking about your day or COVID, or you're worried about your parents or whatever it is. You kind of recognize, well, wow, my thoughts are kind of getting out of control a bit. I'm eating this nice meal. Mindfulness might be just focusing on the meal, right? Look at what are the colors of your meal? What does it smell? How does it taste, right? That kind of grounding in the moment with all your senses. And so that's just a few minutes, right? That's not kind of doing something extra. That's just bringing your mind back to what you're doing. That could be while you're eating. Could be while you're out for a walk. Could be really anywhere. It's just easier when there's different things going on. But that's when I mean mindfulness for this kind of quick tip. It's really about kind of grounding yourself in the present and bringing yourself back to what's going on. What else? If you find yourself really worrying, so this is kind of the flip of mindfulness. It's kind of for the same reason, but they're very different strategies. So I'm just throwing out a bunch of tips here. Everybody finds something that works for them. That could be different. So for some people, using that mindfulness when they're kind of feeling overwhelmed and their mind is racing is the best. For others, they can do something called worry time. It sounds kind of silly, but it's really helpful to, if you find yourself kind of worrying a lot, to compartmentalize those worries. So you kind of say, like, I'm going to have a worry time. So at 6 o'clock, I'm going to give myself 15 minutes. And during that 15 minutes, I can worry about whatever I want to worry about. I always say don't do it before bed. Pick something later in the day, but not right before bed. You don't want to bring up all these worries right before bed. And so the idea is, when you find yourself worrying during the day, you have like a little piece of paper, or your notes on your iPad, whatever it is. And so you just jot down those worries, right? So I'm worried about going to the grocery store this week, and you write it down, and then you try to get back to the task at hand, right? Whatever you're doing, okay, you've written it down, it's there, you're going to worry about it later. And then you leave that for later, and then when you get to the 15 minutes, you can spend those 15 minutes looking at all your worries and thinking about them. It's interesting, a lot of people will say that once they get to that 15 minutes, they have trouble worrying for 15 minutes. So it's interesting because if you let yourself worry during the day, it can actually distract you for hours, right? It doesn't mean you're thinking about those worries the whole time, but like you're trying to do your work and then you're distracted by the worry, and then you try to do your work and you're distracted by the worry. But if you actually say, okay, now I'm going to worry for 15 minutes, sometimes that can be hard to do. You know, there's a comment here, which is true though. All these things I'm talking about can be easier said than done, right? So you know, I'm making them, they're tips, right? So I'm making them sound simple. And so I think I'll steal a line from Joel. He always says that some of the stuff we talk about, it's simple, but it's not easy, right? They're two different things, right? So it's easy for me to explain them to you and for you to understand, but doing them is harder than it seems sometimes.
Melissa, can I ask a question?
Yeah.
I'm just curious
Absolutely.
about, I think there's two things I'm taking away here. One for, myself, how do I manage myself and maintain resilience? But any suggestions as, as leaders, as business owners, how we apply these ideas to our staff when we see or sense they're spiraling, right? How do we deal with that, do you think?
That's a really good question. So, I mean, that depends how well you know your staff and how kind of open the communication is. Certainly, you can talk to them about these tips, right? You can say, I went to this webinar and they talked about doing these things. I'll also give you a few websites. So if that's the kind of communication style you might have with your staff, right? About, there's, it depends, again, it depends what level they're at. We'll talk about, these are kind of the general stress and strategies, and then we'll talk about if you're worried about them actually struggling with anxiety and depression. But for the regular tips, I'll at some point a slide will pop up with some websites for you. So places like the Center for Addiction and Mental Health in Toronto has a whole website dedicated to strategies. The Nova Scotia Health Authority has local stuff. The Canadian Mental Health Association websites all have information. So certainly there's lots out there. And so I can certainly give you kind of links to credible sources, because of course there's a lot out there and not all of it is helpful. So I would just, one of the things we try to promote is being open and honest about these things. I can tell you're really struggling and I'd like to help you, and people appreciate that. So a few other questions came up here. So one kind of idea is about, as things open up, for some people that's going to relieve some stress. For some people that's actually going to make things more stressful, because we're supposed to be still socially distancing, right? This isn't the pandemic's over, yay, let's all hug and party. It's about kind of just opening things up for the economy, but also for people's mental health, right? People can't kind of stay cooped up and socially distance from people forever. But in terms of the physical distancing, I kind of prefer that term, right? Because it's not about not being social. When this all first started, people didn't know what to do, right? If you're walking down the street and somebody moves over 6 feet, it's like your head's down, it's like, it's okay, say hi and be nice like you always have been. So the social part should still be there, but the physical part isn't. And so we are going to have to find a language of communication for when people are making us uncomfortable, and it's going to be uncomfortable for all of us to figure that out, right? In terms of, excuse me, could you just move over a little bit? I found myself doing that with my 5-year-old neighbor, but that's a lot easier when you're talking to a 5-year-old. They're used to people telling them what to do, right? So when it's another adult and you're at the grocery store, I think, we just have to try to stay calm and polite and emphasize to people that, you'd prefer if you just kind of, if you yourself can move, that's even the easier thing to do. Might be an inconvenience if you have to, not go down that grocery aisle for a few minutes. But I think it's, again, acknowledge this is a new time, new for all of us, and we're all kind of going to figure out the pathway of how to do that in a way that we're all comfortable. Let's see. Oh, somebody asked, talking about grounding and whether you're holding your breath. So I don't know. I think that question means to notice if you're holding your breath, because we should be breathing, obviously.
Yes, good, Alyssa. My question was that I was in a session similar to this, and they were talking about mindfulness, that, you know, checking in with yourself and checking to see if you're actually holding your breath. Like, it's that
yeah.
For some people it can become a practice. It's a practice with me that I do that, and then I have to remind myself, that's why I'm feeling like I'm feeling. I've been holding my breath at different points for different reasons. And interestingly, if I say that to people, they say, no, people are breathing. However, it was interesting that in this session, it was also recognized that other people had done that, like that it was people do hold their breath at different times for different reasons, and it can become a very bad practice to do that, obviously.
Sure, absolutely, yeah. I mean, breathing, we don't think about our breathing that much, right? And people can hold their breath. People can start breathing if you're feeling really anxious, you can start breathing fast. So, I mean, one practice is being mindful of your breath, right? That's a whole thing that I know there's a great website. It's not on my list of websites because it's not a specific COVID website, but Anxiety Canada has lots of resources. And one of them is, it's got kind of a recording of, one is kind of deep breathing, so more kind of a relaxation piece, and the other is being mindful of your breath. So actually being able to, notice your breathing, try not to hold it, try not to breathe too fast. It kind of just walks you through, but it's less about teaching you how to breathe and more about just helping you pay attention to your breathing. Yeah. Oh, look, you guys were all texting while I was talking. Yeah. So, a question so it's good. It's a good segue, actually, because unless anybody has any other questions about kind of the general stress, we can talk a bit more about when it becomes more than that. Okay, so somebody was commenting on PTSD. So certainly our understanding of trauma has broadened in recent years, right? That it's not just about people that have been in combat or people who, have experienced, significant natural disasters in their communities or things like that. That traumas can include, I don't want to say small because they're not small, but smaller than a big event like war, right? If they kind of add up over time, that can be a trigger. And certainly for some people during this time, it has been traumatic, that there's been different things happening. Everybody's circumstances are different, right? Some situations have only somewhat worsened. Some situations have significantly worsened, right? Some people have lost their jobs. So certainly PTSD is one, anxiety and depression are another, right? So in terms of, we know that significant stressors can trigger or worsen mental illnesses that are already there. So if somebody already has an anxiety disorder or is prone to have one, maybe they're in their 50s and they haven't really, had a panic attack until, they haven't had one since they were 30, or 40, right? But these things can then come back, right? This pandemic can trigger some of these major things before. There's also the impact in terms of social isolation. I think it's really interesting. We've kind of thought about the extroverts. I've heard a lot about like, oh, the poor extroverts, right? They have to kind of isolate, and that's going to be really hard for them. The truth is, I don't think it's been easy for the introverts either. And part of that is, I think, going back. I think somebody mentioned something about, you know, the change of going back, right, to work back to different places. I think that's going to be even harder for the introvert. So it's not to say that being home alone has been easy, but what we know is that the longer you can avoid something that makes you anxious, the harder it's going to be to actually do it. And that's why we'll talk a bit about cognitive behavior therapy, but that's what cognitive behavior, the behavior part does, right? Is helps you slowly get back. And so some people are going to need some kind of plan, right? Some people are going to need, they can't just return to work like, okay, everybody back to the way it was. You know, for somebody with significant anxiety, they're going to need some time and planning to do that. You know, then there's the people that have depression, right? So we know that when you don't have social contacts and when you're not feeling productive, when, as I said, those wellness pieces, right? So somebody with depression isn't feeling enjoyment, isn't feeling like they're accomplishing anything, and they've, by virtue of the pandemic, had their social contacts reduced. And if they're feeling down and depressed, they're probably going to reduce their contacts even more. They're probably not even going to reach out and text or do anything like that. So for those people, so, you know, we've mentioned PTSD, we've mentioned depression, anxiety. Those are kind of the big common ones. People are going to need help, right? This isn't just going to be a few tips that we throw out at them. I think that's an important distinction to make. Somebody asked about your employees. It's not up to you, obviously, to make that distinction. But if you're feeling like this is more than just that general stress that we're all feeling, try to have that open conversation about, you know, I'm worried about you. Here's some places you can go. Again, we're all in Nova Scotia here. The Nova Scotia Health Authority has some resources. I can, in a minute, we'll talk about some online resources. So, for example, during the pandemic, obviously nothing's happening face-to-face in mental health. There's no clinics open. So more things have gone online. But for some people, again, it's not going to be just a flip of a switch of, oh, okay, I can just go back to in-person contact for things. So we can talk a bit about internet. So I think if you want to throw the slides up, this is where we're going. Yeah, so these are just some resources that I don't think you have to jot down. I think we said that this is recorded and can be sent to you. So these are, again, there's lots out there, but this is just the Canadian Mental Health Association, the Centre for Addiction and Mental Health, and the Canadian Psychological Association. So those are, again, these are more the kind of resources and tips. But if we go to the next slide, I'll talk a little bit about why internet-based cognitive behavior therapy is so important right now. So the good news is we've been studying internet-based cognitive behavior therapy for years, more so in the UK and Australia. So it wasn't that, you know, all of a sudden there's a pandemic and we need to kind of figure out whether doing online therapy works. We actually know that from years of research. So just to give you a brief, because somebody mentioned, I think right at the beginning, kind of what is cognitive behavior therapy. So cognitive is just a fancy word for thoughts. And so a main piece of cognitive behavior therapy is helping people in balancing their thinking. So people with anxiety tend to overestimate chances of bad things happening, right? So it's not to say bad things don't happen, they do. But really kind of, for example, somebody who's worried to get in a car, of course car accidents happen, but this person thinks they're going to get a car accident and die every time they get in a car, right? So that's kind of overestimating the chances that that's going to happen. So the cognitive piece would help that person kind of look at the evidence and balance their thought to be realistic. Not positive. It's one of my, I don't know if pet peeve is strong enough, that there's a lot of reputable companies out there still talking about positive thinking. And that can be really invalidating to someone. You can imagine for yourself, if you're really anxious about something and somebody says, you know, well, just think positively about it. Like, of course you're not going to get a car accident, you know, that doesn't help, right? If you, and positive would even be like, you get to go see your grandmother today, right? Or whatever it is, right? It's trying to make something positive when a person's feeling really bad and negative. And so just helping it be a balanced thought is much more effective than trying to switch it to something positive. Again, that's for these people that have anxiety and depression. You know, maybe for someone who's just feeling a little stressed and has a lot of positives that they can think about, that might be okay. But certainly for people that have anxiety and depression, it can be really invalidating. And then the behavior part is what we talked about in terms of taking small steps to, for anxiety, face your fears, right? So, you can sit around and think about it all you want, but until you actually go out and do it and prove to yourself that bad thing isn't going to happen, or isn't going to be as bad as you thought it was going to be, then you're not going to get better. And for depression, that's kind of what we talked a little bit about reentry, right? It's the idea of like, okay, you haven't left your house, and that's true for people with depression long before the pandemic, is to slowly get back to life, right? What is it that you can take a small step and do first that's going to feel okay in doing? And then somebody mentioned, just recognizing that these are normal emotions, right? That's definitely part of it, is just labeling it, right? Just like we said for all these other pieces, like, this is my anxiety. It's not in and of itself dangerous, right? It's an emotion, and I'm learning skills to cope with it. So cognitive behavior therapy has been around since the 70s. We've got decades of research to show that it works for anxiety and depression. Internet-based cognitive behavior therapy hasn't been around for as long, but as I said, in the UK and Australia, they've been doing this research for at least 10 or 15 years. And so we know that it's a gold standard. During this time, there's been this need for social and physical distancing. Prior to that, it's been more about accessibility, right? Whether you live in a rural area, whether it's that you work long hours and you can't get in to see a therapist during the 9 to 5 time. So there was a recognition that we could use these internet-based products. I'm old enough to know that the self-help research started with books, right? What do you do when you actually have a physical book and you can work through it? So we actually have decades of research showing that for mild to moderate anxiety and depression, you can use self-help programs. So all of that research was already there. So now, knowing that we have to do the social physical distancing, we need flexibility around other responsibilities, and the demand to the healthcare system is going to, I think, skyrocket if it hasn't already, because we've talked a lot about the physical symptoms, and first wave, second wave, we use all these different kinds of languages. I think people in mental health are pretty certain that there's going to be a huge wave of mental health concerns, probably starting around now, because people, when you stop focusing on the immediate issues, then the mental health might start to take over. All right, next slide, I think. Yeah, so just a little bit about us. We're one of a few different companies out there doing digital cognitive behavior therapy. The idea behind it, as I said, is it's evidence-based. It's based on these decades of research on both cognitive behavior therapy as well as the more recent online cognitive behavior therapy. It's timely. There's no wait times, right? You can sign up and you're in. It's stigma-free. Some people, unfortunately, still feel a lot of stigma around calling a mental health, even just calling a mental health clinic to try to get an appointment is stigmatizing to them. They don't want to acknowledge that. So this is, you just sign up. No one even knows you're there. I mean, obviously, there's a coach involved. I'll tell you about that. They'll know. But I mean, in your life, like, there's no waiting room. There's no kind of stigma involved there. It's personalized to you, and it's accessible anytime, anywhere. So just, you can see here, for us, it's not just an app. It is an app in that you can have it on your phone and take it anywhere, but it's also a website and a platform, and we also have coaches. So the research that's been done over the last decade or so shows that although self-help and internet cognitive behavior therapy can work, most people, just like anything else, behavior change is hard. We were talking about that. It's hard, and most people drop out, right? So if you try to just do it on your own, about 80 to 90% of people don't do more than 1 or 2 sessions. And so there's research showing that what we call guided ICBT, so having a coach or a therapist there to support you, to motivate you, to keep you accountable. We in our program, we really see it kind of like a personal trainer, right? That we all know we're supposed to go to the gym or work out, right? We might even know how to do some of the moves, but a personal trainer actually can say, oh no, you need to tweak how you're standing there or your position there. And if you're going to be talking to your personal trainer, oh, they're going to ask me if I did that routine, I better make sure I do it. So that's what our coaches are kind of like. They're trained to in motivational interviewing, so they're trained to keep you motivated, and also troubleshoot, if there's something in the program, because this sometimes can be complicated in some of the CBT that we do, and so they're there to also troubleshoot some of that. Do I have any data on the increase? Yeah, sorry, the increase in sustainability. Yeah.
Mention about the coaches that in terms of how they work, it's over phone, over video, or over messaging. 30 hours a week. Sorry, 30 minutes a week.
Yes, unlimited access to the platform, 30 minutes of coaching a week. Yeah, so the question was increased sustainability from the dropout rate. Yes, with guided ICBT, the dropout rates go down to more like 20 to 30%, which is actually pretty. That's actually in keeping or better than face-to-face, right? So everything has dropout, including face-to-face therapy. So yeah, once you add that kind of coach guided piece, the dropout rates are more like the face-to-face, if not better, actually.
Thanks.
Anything else?
Just a question, Alyssa.
Yeah.
So has this been launched at Joel? Like this is a service that's available?
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, so right now, people can go and just go to the website and sign up on their own if they want. We decided during the pandemic to give people a deal, so it's 50% off. So it's a monthly subscription if you just sign up that way. But we, as the slide said, are open to also talking to different companies if they'd like to kind of talk about how to get it for their employees versus people just signing up on their own.
Is it covered through, if you have a Blue Cross, the way your counseling session with your therapist would be covered?
Unfortunately, no, although it's much cheaper, right? So face-to-face is with a psychologist these days is close to $200 an hour. This is $99 a month, and with the 50% off right now, it's only $50 a month. So it is much cheaper, but no, unfortunately, because they're coaches and not registered professionals, right now the insurance companies won't cover it because it doesn't kind of have CRA code kind of thing. Like it's like they have to, but certainly we're hopeful that that's going to happen because this is, again, taking on more in Canada and you know, in the US and even the US, but Australia and UK, these kinds of things are covered. So.
Now, do you have any coaches that are registered with the Psychology Association or whatever the appropriate
No,
credential?
we have some coaches that are graduate students in the clinical psychology program. So they do have a background that way, but they're students, they're not registered. And then the others do have a bachelor degree in kind of things like psychology, social work, helping professions, but they're not registered.
Okay. So are there any caveats then, like as people, you know, sign on to the service and then they're getting a coaching service, but it's not a registered psychologist particularly? Are there, I guess, caveats to that?
So yeah, we're clear about that for sure. The idea is that the platform itself is the treatment, right? So it is a self-help treatment. You could go through it on your own without having a coach at all. In fact, we have that option if people want. So yeah, we're clear about that is the treatment, and that the coaches are there just like a support and to help you get through, but they're not therapists, and we're clear about that.
Service. Okay, thanks.
No problem.
Sounds like a great fit for Generation Z.
Yeah, it's interesting. There's research, there's research happening everywhere, but Canadian-wise, there's research coming out of Saskatchewan doing this kind of thing, where they made that assumption. And I do think a lot of that generation would sign up for this kind of thing. What's interesting is if you can get the age range of kind of 40 to 60 to sign up, they're the ones that stick with it. So it's interesting that even though we assume, do you know what I mean? So the younger generation, I think, is more likely to kind of find it and sign up for it. But if it's kind of like, for example, a doctor recommends to a person in their 40s or 50s that they should do this, then they actually engage and stick with it. So.
Okay.
Any other questions? I don't think.
This has been really helpful, Alyssa, and I think we probably should have launched this webinar earlier rather than later. But I certainly have lots of takeaways from this, and kudos to you. How long has the business been around? Is it 2017? Joel, I just looked on your website and it looks like Global did an interview with you in 2017. You launched it.
Yeah, we incorporated in 2017 in June, and as you can imagine, there was a lot of work to get everything up and running. We ran a pilot study in 2018 with a version of what we have now that's not even close to being comparable. Like, it was just very, very, very simple. We got really good results from that. We essentially showed three things. Number one, that anyone, so essentially how the program works is once you log on, there's 9 different modules, or we call them sessions, and each of them kind of take a half hour to go through. It's a bit of reading, there's some graphics, there's some examples, there's some characters, there's some videos. It takes about 30 minutes each. The idea is you do 1 a week. And then as you go through the program, it unlocks these tools. The tools help you do the practice. So in traditional CBT, if you're seeing someone, it traditionally give you like a worksheet that's a piece of paper. For us, we've created these interactive tools that you can have at any time. You can like pull it out of your phone. If you're at the grocery store and you're feeling anxious, you could use it right there. And so with the program, we showed that the more modules a person did, the lower their anxiety was at the end. We showed that we had much higher completion rates if they were matched with a coach. And then we showed that anyone who did at least 3 of the modules went from having an average starting point of moderate anxiety to, by the end, a non-clinical level of anxiety. So an anxiety level that if you showed up with that score to a doctor, your doctor would say, like, you do not have a diagnosis anymore. And again, that was our first pilot study. We're actually now working with the Nova Scotia Health Authority. They have asked us to build a depression program now. So we're working on that, and that should hopefully be ready by the end of the summer. And yeah, so we're offering this to individuals, but if businesses want to sign up and offer this to their employees, there are several different ways we can figure out payments for that as well.
All right. Thank you. Mark? We have you muted here.
Well, I should be back on there.
There you go.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
We got, okay, great. I'd like to thank our presenters, Dr. Pence and Joel, for contributing valuably today to help our mental health. And I think collectively, I think we've got a little bit of a pickup from that today. The sun's shining as well, that helps as well too, and helps with everyone's mental health, and they're doing it that way. As we mentioned at the beginning of the show, FBA has certainly provided a lot of support to our members, and this is part of the procedure that we're doing to help the support and make sure that we are all part of that big family at the end of the day, and we're still here contributing and part of it. As mentioned, I think we didn't mention this time, but FBA has also waived our membership fees for the next 4 months for any new members coming on board as part of that process, and we encourage anyone that thinks of anyone that they could welcome to our organization. We'd like to have them join with us. Certainly it's a confusing time, but we're certainly looking forward to the future, and this is what these sessions and these programs represent. And I'd like to thank everyone for being that way and being connected this way. We're going to continue to produce these webinars and continue from there until we can all get together at some point, but that may not be tomorrow, so there we go.
Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Thanks.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.